Maybe to start, let's tell the audience about what Boost does.
So we are a payments company that's focused maniacally on business to business. And specifically within that arena, our focus tends to be on very large companies paying their suppliers and vendors around the globe. So what we do is take what is very often a very manual process with respect to processing the payment and equally, if not in some cases more importantly, exchanging the data associated with that transaction. We take that from a very manual process to a completely automated process so that both the buyer and the supplier can enjoy a passive experience on both sides, where sometimes these payments are, extraordinarily large. A single payment might house thousands of invoices. Each invoice might have hundreds of line item detail associated with it. So the reconciliation process associated with these transactions is often very tedious, very manual, very human error prone. And by migrating that to essentially blinking lights, we not only reduce the cost and increase the speed, but also the reliability of those transactions.
hmm And is there also, some proprietary infrastructure that you have which enables this kind of seamless transition of funds,
Yeah,
transmission
we
of funds?
have 6 patents that are associated with the technology that we've built in-house that does various things on our various platforms and solutions. So it's largely proprietary and it's all purpose built for that community. So whereas we didn't invent B2B payments, right? But historically, certainly as it relates to commercial card products, the B2B end of it has historically been really reserved for travel and entertainment and some, face-to-face in-store use of corporate cards by small businesses. Where we've really focused our energies for the past 17 years is migrating large payments by large companies to their vendors that have previously been check, wire, or ACH. So our technology is all about migrating those transactions to what's commonly referred to as a straight-through processed payment to the supplier. And again, supporting the data exchange that's required to make those transactions completely passive for both sides.
So is it kind of within ACH or wire, or is it a completely separate way of transmitting?
It's separate. It's separate. So whereas we utilize various payment modalities from time to time, depending on what the requirements are. And we could even have multiple modalities within a single payment. So we may have for example, a cross-border transaction that may start off as a card payment that midway we convert into some sort of account-to-account transfer. It may be via wire, it may be via ACH, it may be via SWIFT. We process payments to 180 countries. So it depends on the variables relating to that specific buyer supplier profile that dictates the type of payment modality we have to use. But the vast majority of our payments initiate as a commercial card transaction.
hmm I'm curious if, in the onboarding of a new customer, or even before that, as you're kind of, talking to a prospective new company to become a client, that there's an education process because, it may be difficult for them to understand, well, I know these other three ways of paying, but I'm kind of nervous about, exploring this fourth way.
Absolutely. A lot of what we do is educational, is consultative in many ways. Credit cards in the commercial arena are relatively new. When I started the company 17 years ago, the notion of utilizing a commercial card product to pay the types of payments that we now facilitate on behalf of corporates was unheard of. I was laughed at, frankly, by many financial institutions. Like, none of our customers are going to use a card to make a $40 million payment, or even a $2 million payment. So we still deal with challenges, which are, kind of a combination of inertia, right? They've been
Mm.
doing it the same way with the same payment modalities forever, as well as misunderstandings, misinformation about the use and acceptance of commercial card products. And very often the knee-jerk reaction of a supplier about the notion of accepting commercial cards is, hey, it's very expensive. I don't want to pay to get paid. Check, wire, ACH are free. We know that they're not free at all. There's a lot of costs associated with those transactions. As I mentioned earlier, just all of the reconciliation processes. And there are some direct costs that are also associated with those transactions as well. But where it really comes into play is in the working capital. When we could sit down with the supplier and ask the right questions, which our team really knows how to do, and understand what their requirements are from a working capital perspective, we very often get them comfortable with the notion of card acceptance. I'll give you a perfect example. It's very common to have an early pay discount. Corporate customers suppliers often offer an early pay discount. Pay within 10 days, we'll give you a 2% early pay discount.
Mm-hmm.
Yet when they're introduced to the notion of accepting cards, as I said, their knee-jerk reaction may be too expensive. Yet very often we can have them trade in that 2% early pay discount for commercial card acceptance, where they get paid still on day 10, but their cost of acceptance for the card may be 125 basis points all in. So
Mm-hmm.
that 75 basis points just falls right to the bottom line. So
Mm-hmm.
it is, in fact, very educational. It's, dealing with misperceptions, misinformation, and introducing the reality of this great payment method that not only helps the buyer, because it is a working capital instrument, unlike check, wire, ACH, which
Mm-hmm.
is cash right out of the coffers. And from the supplier's perspective, like I said, very often, see, the win-win we always shoot for is to expand the days payable outstanding, the DPO for the buyer, while at the same time reducing the days sales outstanding, DSO, for the supplier,
Mm-hmm.
by sandwiching in the middle the grace period offered up by the card issuer, the financial institution. And very often we get that dynamic. But again, sorry for being so long-winded, it does often go back to education, and to a consultative approach to truly understanding what the goals are of both the buyer and the supplier. And we can accomplish that by introducing card acceptance right there.
Mm-hmm. And I presume that your retention rate is pretty high. Like once you've been able to get that customer over the hump of learning about the system and then they trust it over time, that they then continue using your solution.
Yeah, our attrition rate is incredibly low. Traditional credit card processing attrition rates for retail or even e-commerce or restaurants is in the mid to upper 20%, and that has a lot to do with the competitive atmosphere where people come in and reprogram terminals and more traditional card use and acceptance equipment and technologies. We really have virtually no attrition. Where we see attrition is when you have a large corporation paying a supplier through us with a commercial card, let's say. And like many, if not most, large corporations, they rotate contractors and vendors each year, right? So they may be buying widgets from XYZ Corp through us now, but they sign a new contract to buy those same widgets with company ABC. So what we often get is the call from the buyer. They say, hey, we're no longer buying from this company. We're now buying from that company. Could you please reach out to them and set them up with card acceptance? So the attrition we see Our version of attrition is a particular buyer supplier profile.
Mm-hmm.
That volume may drop, but we're going to likely pick up that volume with a different buyer supplier profile.
Mm-hmm. Um, are there certain sectors that where Boost is more prevalent than others?
There are probably about 12 or 14 verticals that we focus a lot of energy on. We tend to be very attracted to and attractive to um, industries that are very messy in terms of the exchange of data. So, industries like healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
where I'm talking about the B2B payment side of it, claims payments, and even payments by large healthcare institutions to vendors or suppliers. Freight and logistics is another area that we're very involved with, where again, you have these disparate ways in which data is communicated and delivered to and from various stakeholders. And in freight logistics, there could be many stakeholders involved in moving cargo from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm.
It could involve land, sea, air, rail, just to get that product from point A on the globe to point B. So it could get very messy, and our technology smooths out that messiness. Other industries include industrial manufacturing is another area that one wouldn't necessarily think, oh, that's perfect for credit cards. Yet you may have, large consumer goods companies purchasing chemicals or raw or semi-raw materials from other corporations. And again, they're looking for working capital benefit. Both sides of the equation are.
Mm-hmm.
So commercial cards are often great, solutions for that. So those are the kind of industries that we tend to go after,
Mm-hmm.
where again, the current payment modalities and data exchange tend to be a little messy.
Mm-hmm. Now you've been with Boost for nearly 2 decades, but you've led other companies. You have quite a rich kind of history, building leading companies. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background?
Sure. I started in the payments arena in the late 80s, and that's when I had been involved with a small ticket leasing company that happened to lease these things called point of sale devices, which were really just coming into the mix at the time.
Mm-hmm.
There was a recent migration off, the old knuckle busters where you call in the merchant number and the card number and you got an authorization code. So these point of sale devices were relatively new. The short version of the story is that the individual running this leasing company turned out to be not quite the person I had hoped he was. So I kind of took over the company. And as part of that, I started, doing a little research as to, all right, what's at the other end of the line that these things dialing to? And I learned more and more about, the credit card processing. And then I started an ISO in 1990
Mm-hmm.
that I ran for 10 years, ultimately sold it. So I've been in the payments business. I then ran a public company for a while and led the financing round for that company. We sold that. It was really 17 years ago and all of my historical activities had really been focusing on acquiring and specifically the consumer arena because there really wasn't much going on with B2B at all, except for T&E, which acts like a consumer transaction essentially. But I started researching why there was really no activity in B2B. This magnificent industry, this huge industry of B2B payments, which actually in many respects dwarfs consumer payments. Why has the credit card processing arena not focused in on it all? So I started doing research around that and found out that it's very messy. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if I walk into a store and I buy a product with my credit card, I have an experience.
Mm-hmm.
The next 200 people that walk into that same store and buy that same product have the same exact experience that I have. The price is the same. The whole experience is exactly the same. Now switch to B2B relationships, especially in the larger a strategic sector where you may have a huge computer company that maybe sells super high margin services to a small company like Boost,
Hmm.
or they may sell super low margin product to Department of Defense, right? And
Hmm.
everything in between. So the relationships that you see in B2B are almost entirely every time unique.
Hmm.
The terms are different. The pricing structure is often different. The margins are completely different. Maybe I buy a lot, maybe they buy a little. So it's real messy, and it's very unique and it's very bespoke. So that's why there really has not been much of attention paid to it, because the credit card processing industry was built to be pretty much cookie cutter, right?
Hmm.
Serving that retailer or that restaurant. And then obviously later came catalogs and ultimately e-commerce. But again, mostly all the same. When you
Hmm.
go on an e-commerce site with a wallet-based payment, it's the same thing over and over again. Whereas B2B is just so bespoke in every single case. So I started looking around for solutions when I started Boost. And not only did I not find any solutions out there, I found very few people that really understood the issues,
Hmm.
understood the problems, the friction, the pain that
Hmm.
buyers and suppliers were having for B2B. So that really set me on a course to figure out how can we serve the B2B community? How can we, if you look at our marketing materials and our website, you see images of bridges everywhere. And it's not just because they're beautiful, they often are. It's because it really reflects the nature of our positioning in the marketplace. The thesis being, in order to properly serve the enterprise level B2B, you have to sit in the middle of the
Hmm.
buyer and the supplier, whereas historically the credit card processing industry has been bifurcated with those that are entirely on the AP side, the issuers, the program managers, and then those that are entirely on the AR side. That could be processors, acquirers, ISOs, PayFacs, billing companies. Boost from day one was always set up as a bridge joining those two.
Hmm.
We always have felt that in order to properly serve that specific community of enterprise level B2B, you had to have connective tissue to both the buyer slash issuer and the supplier acquirer. So our technology has always kind of followed that North Star.
Hmm.
And our go-to-market strategies are all about, again, serving both sides of that equation.
Hmm. I noticed that you've taken in some outside capital, but I believe you did so maybe further into the life of the company, maybe not at the very beginning. Um, Obviously you're a seasoned executive, so I imagine that was by design. You wanted to kind of first get to a certain level with the companies, maybe to see where the adoption was and that it was sustainable before you brought in the outside investment. Is that how you approached it?
Sure. I mean, it would be nice to say that I had it all planned out, but as we all know, it doesn't always work that way. The entrepreneurial life is you're often opportunistic, somewhat reactive, and always try to be proactive whenever you can. One thing I knew is that I wanted to retain as much of the company as I possibly can.
Hmm.
And there's always that balance between when is a company really ready to raise capital, beyond the point of it being an idea, but you don't necessarily have to be a fully seasoned organization with significant revenue. So it was kind of in that between part where we knew we can prove out our thesis. We had a certain number of customers. When I started the company, we were primarily a service organization because we had not yet kind of morphed into a technology company.
Hmm.
That came about 5 or 6 years later into our life, which I'll talk about in a second. But the capital raising piece, I funded the company myself for several years. Then I brought in some seed capital from a small group. And it really wasn't until it was probably 10 years at least into it where we cut our first deal with a VC
Mm-hmm.
who did our A round, and then 2 years later we did a B round with the same group,
Mm-hmm.
and then about 4 years later we did a C round with a growth equity firm.
Mm-hmm.
They're all still our investors. We have a wonderful relationship with them. They sit on our board. So it's been a wonderful experience on that front.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been great.
Excellent. I'm curious, sometimes what happens, right, as you prove out the model and folks see that your product or solution is working, that maybe the incumbents, others come into your space. Have you noticed like other financial institutions increasingly paying attention to B2B payments, even though it is not, it's very bespoke, it's harder to do, but they see the dollar volumes and they say, okay, let's create our own version.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the B2B payments arena is definitely more crowded now than it was 10 years ago, for
Hmm.
sure. Um, but it's no less difficult,
Hmm.
right? And I remember when I started the company, I was on the board of the ETA, which is made up of primarily the CEOs and COOs of the larger credit card processing companies and acquirers, as well as some of the brands sit on the board as well. And I remember when I started Boost, or was considering starting Boost, I went around the room and said, "Hey guys, I'm looking at starting a B2B company. Is anybody interested? I need a processor. I need an acquirer." And with one exception, the responses I got pretty much from every one of these folks who I had known for many, many years was, "Hey, we get that B2B is huge. We get that ultimately we're going to need to want to be in that industry. But right now, it's much easier for us to essentially replicate and airlift our B2C technology and bring it to places like Chile, Italy, Vietnam, Canada,
Mm.
Dubai, than it is for us to tweak our technology and serve this thing called B2B in our backyard.
Hmm.
So amazingly, this is 17 years later, that hasn't changed that much.
Mm.
The credit card processors, the large players, still have not really focused much energy on B2B. That doesn't mean they don't have any B2B on their portfolio. They do. Much of it is kind of not quite by accident, but by various associated relationships that ultimately get them some B2B traffic. But
Hmm.
there's still very few of us that are maniacally focused on B2B, and even less that are focused on enterprise level B2B.
Hmm.
Um, you know, as we became a technology, I'd even say the reason why we became a technology is we would get all of these requests from the field, from suppliers who we had signed up for kind of basic services, and they would come to us and say, "Hey, this is great, but can you do this?"
Mm.
Or when you send us a report, we're now getting it in kind of a basic PDF or Excel. Can you deliver it to us in XML or EDIA 20 or some funky customized format and delivery protocol? And we couldn't do it at the time. And we looked around and nobody else could do it at the time. So that's when I started bringing in technologists to start building some of this stuff internally so that
Hmm.
we could satisfy what the market was screaming for,
Hmm.
and that kind of set us on a path of migrating from a fully services oriented company to really more of a fintech. And
Hmm.
really, ever since then, we've been technology focused. All of our solutions are tech enabled. We're just, we're tech freaks at this point,
Mm.
always looking to find something to enhance the experience of buyers, suppliers, and our partners. We have many distribution channel partners
Hmm.
that are also looking for new ways to introduce enhancements and new solutions to their customer base. So it's really been an exciting ride. The last, year and a half, 2 years, we have with our new CTO, we've introduced a lot of AI activities into our business carefully, and watching it very carefully. We don't fully trust it at this point, but we're seeing how it can be used to expedite a lot of the work that we do, to help out with our scalability, reliability, security on our platforms. So it's kind of this never-ending path towards kind of finding the perfect solutions for your customers. It's really fun. It's very exciting.